The air inside Tech Vanguard's executive boardroom smelled of burnt circuits and arrogance. A $2 million prototype sat at the center of the room like a wounded animal surrounded by its creators, all too proud to admit they didn't know how to save it. Victoria Sterling stood at the head of the long glass table, her diamond bracelet catching the light with every flick of her hand. She was everything the valley worshipped, beautiful, ruthless, and unbothered by anything that couldn't be bought. Her voice sliced through the static like a laser. 6 weeks, and this engine still dies after 14 minutes. Do any of you geniuses have an explanation? No one spoke. The only response was the nervous hum of the engine's cooling fans and the shifting of expensive suits. Victoria's blue eyes narrowed as she surveyed the silent faces around her. Harvard, MIT, Stanford, all rendered useless in the presence of failure. She exhaled sharply and turned toward the window, the skyline of Palo Alto gleaming like a city built on pride. Behind her, a janitor paused his sweeping. Jamal Washington, the man every executive pretended not to see. His hands were calloused, his uniform faded, but his eyes lingered on the sparking engine just long enough to catch Victoria's attention. She turned. "You," she said, her tone dipped in condescension. "Yes, you. Do you find this funny, or do you just like standing there watching people work?" Jamal straightened, clutching the trash bag in one hand. "No, ma'am," he said softly, "just cleaning up." Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only cruelty. "Tell me, Mr. Cleanup Crew, you think you can fix this? Maybe your mop has magical diagnostic powers we haven't tried yet." The room erupted in laughter. Even the engineers who should have known better chuckled, relieved to see someone else caught in her crosshairs. Victoria's heels clicked as she stepped closer, the scent of her perfume mixing with the faint burn of overheated circuitry. She stopped inches from him, voice low but sharp enough to cut. "Here's a deal, maintenance boy. Fix this $2 million engine that MIT engineers couldn't repair and I'll marry you right here in this boardroom." The words hung in the air like a slap. The laughter returned louder, meaner this time. Someone muttered, "Better bring a ring, Jamal." Another said, "Maybe he'll mop it back to life." Jamal didn't respond. He didn't even look at her. He only stared at the machine the way a musician listens to a piano gone slightly out of tune. Victoria's smirk widened. "What's the matter? No smart comeback. I'll even sweeten the deal if you fail, and you will. Security will escort you out permanently." Silence. For a moment, it felt like the air itself had stopped breathing. Jamal set down the trash bag, wiped his palms against his coveralls, and walked toward the engine. The room went still. He didn't speak, didn't perform. He just placed his hand on the metal casing and listened. The engine's vibration carried through his fingertips, a tremor of something offbeat, something wrong in its rhythm. His grandfather's voice whispered in memory, soft and steady. "Engines have heartbeats, boy. They tell you when they're hurting if you listen right." He closed his eyes, counted the intervals of the pulsing hum, and then opened them again. "It's not broken," he said quietly, "it's confused." Victoria blinked, thrown off by the confidence in his tone. "Excuse me." "The AI's reading mixed input," Jamal said. "German mechanics, American code, the systems are arguing with each other." The engineers exchanged amused looks. One whispered, "He's quoting YouTube now." But across the table, Dr. Alina Rodriguez, the company's senior technical consultant, stopped writing. She leaned forward, studying him like a teacher recognizing a student who shouldn't exist. "Arguing?" she asked. "Explain." Jamal pointed toward the flickering screen. "The diagnostics show harmonic disruption. That's not a random error. It's the system trying to correct something it doesn't understand. If your AI was trained on imperial measurements but your components were made in metric, the machine's compensating for something that isn't there. It's fighting itself." For the first time in weeks, Rodriguez looked interested. Victoria, on the other hand, looked furious. "Oh, please," she said. "We've spent millions on research and you think a janitor just solved it with a theory about inches and centimeters?" Jamal met her glare with calm steadiness. "No, ma'am, I didn't solve it. The machine did, you just haven't been listening." The boardroom fell silent again, the kind of silence that carried tension like a live wire. Rodriguez turned toward Victoria. "Maybe we should check his idea." Victoria's jaw tightened. "We don't take advice from staff who clean toilets." "But we do when those toilets work," someone muttered under their breath. Nervous laughter. Rodriguez didn't smile. "Sometimes," she said, "answers come from where arrogance refuses to look." The comment stung. Victoria's eyes hardened into glass. "We're done here," she said, voice cold and final. "Security." "Leave him," Rodriguez interrupted again. "I'd like to hear more." Jamal stepped back from the engine, wiped his hand again, and nodded politely. "That's all, ma'am. Thank you for letting me speak." He picked up the trash bag and walked out as quietly as he had entered, the echo of his boots swallowed by marble. But even as he disappeared down the corridor, something lingered in the room, a faint shift in gravity, a whisper of possibility. The executives began to murmur, not laughing now but questioning what they'd just heard. Rodriguez stared at the door Jamal had walked through, her mind turning gears faster than the machine on the table. And Victoria, still standing in the glow of her own arrogance, refused to admit that the janitor's words had unsettled her more than any investor ever could. She brushed it off with a flick of her wrist, the diamonds on her bracelet glinting like little sparks of denial. "Ridiculous," she muttered. "He'll be gone by the end of the week." But when she turned back toward the engine, she caught her own reflection in its chrome surface, and for a brief second even she looked uncertain. That night, as the lights dimmed and the building emptied, the engine sat in silence, its dormant sensors flickering faintly as though it, too, remembered the man who had listened when everyone else mocked. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now and tell me, have you ever had someone cross a line so far you stopped recognizing the person they pretended to be? No one in that building knew it yet, but the bet she made for her own amusement had already become her undoing. Because somewhere inside the man she tried to humiliate lived generations of skill, patience, and pride, and before this was over, she would learn what happens when you gamble against a Washington. Jamal's footsteps echoed down the long, polished corridor, each one carrying the weight of years that had never been seen or respected. He didn't look back. He'd learned long ago that people like Victoria Sterling didn't see janitors, they saw furniture that moved. But under the fluorescent glow of that sterile hallway, his reflection in the glass told a different story. A man who carried his grandfather's wisdom, his mother's sacrifice, and a quiet genius that no one in that building could measure. Long before he was a janitor, he was a boy in Detroit who grew up in a small brick house that shook every time his grandfather's garage door rolled open. The air inside that garage was thick with gasoline, heat, and rhythm, not the rhythm of music, but of machinery breathing in time. Samuel Washington was a man of few words, but his hands told stories every day. He could tell what was wrong with an engine by listening to it. He'd place his palm on the hood, close his eyes, and hear what no one else could: a bearing too tight, a belt too loose, a heart slightly out of sync. To him, fixing an engine was like healing a living thing. "Engines don't lie, boy," Samuel said one summer afternoon as sunlight spilled across steel tools and oil stains. "You can lie to people, you can lie to yourself, but machines, they tell the truth, always." 12-year-old Jamal nodded, watching every motion, memorizing every sound as his grandfather tuned a Cadillac engine until it purred like it had been reborn. That was the first time Jamal understood what real mastery looked like: quiet, deliberate, earned through repetition and respect. When his grandfather passed, the garage fell silent. The smell of oil lingered for weeks like the ghost of a memory that refused to fade. Jamal kept one of the wrenches, the same one his grandfather used on his first Ford repair job in the 1970s. He never cleaned it. The rust on that wrench was sacred, a history written in metal. Life after Samuel was a blur of responsibility and survival. His mother, Denise, was diagnosed with breast cancer when Jamal was just starting community college. Every paycheck went toward chemotherapy, hospital bills, and medication that insurance refused to fully cover. He'd been accepted to transfer to the University of Michigan's engineering program. He had the grades, the letters, the potential. But when his mother's doctor gave him the estimate $3,000 per treatment, insurance covering barely half, the math didn't leave room for dreams. So he made a choice that broke his heart quietly. He sold his textbooks, withdrew from the transfer list, and took on 3 jobs. In the mornings, he worked at a gas station. Evenings, at an auto parts store. Nights, cleaning office buildings where people walked past him as if he didn't exist. What those people never understood was that Jamal never stopped studying. Between shifts, during lunch breaks, he filled notebooks with equations, designed sketches, and diagnostic algorithms. He studied torque ratios, thermodynamics, integration papers, anything he could find in open-source engineering journals. His knowledge didn't come from professors. It came from obsession, from listening to machines the way his grandfather taught him to, through patience, precision, and instinct. Years passed. His mother fought cancer like a soldier until the disease finally loosened its grip. The bills didn't, but Jamal never regretted it. She was alive. That was worth every sacrifice. Eventually, he found an opening through a staffing agency for a technical consultant position at a rising tech company in California. The pay wasn't much, but the description promised growth. When he got there, reality hit. The technical consultant title was a polite disguise for janitor. The mop was real. The tools were his only in theory. Yet even as he emptied trash bins and polished floors, Jamal saw what others missed. He paid attention to how the engineers spoke, what problems they argued about, what designs they abandoned. Every night, after the last executive left and the offices fell silent, he'd walk past the prototype lab and stop at the window. Inside sat the company's crown jewel, the AI-guided autonomous engine that had made Tech Vanguard famous. Jamal would just watch it hum in the dark, blue lights flickering across its steel veins. He could feel something off about it even from the hallway. The vibration wasn't smooth, it was fighting itself. He didn't need diagnostics to hear it, his bones could tell. One night he couldn't help himself. The cleaning crew had gone home and he slipped into the lab. The engine stood under soft lights, wires coiled like arteries. On the table beside it lay a stack of technical schematics. He traced his fingers across the lines and numbers, whispering them aloud. The measurements didn't add up, metric on one side, imperial on the other. It was small, almost invisible, but to him it screamed. He leaned closer, pressing his ear near the casing, listening to the faint hum inside. It was the same sound his grandfather once described, a machine crying out to be understood. The door behind him creaked open. Dr. Alina Rodriguez, Tech Vanguard's legendary engineer, stood in the doorway. "You shouldn't be in here," she said. "I know, ma'am," Jamal replied, not moving, "but your machine's trying to tell you something." She frowned. "What did you just say?" He pointed to the blueprints. "The system's confused. You're asking it to calculate pressure in millimeters but calibrating it with inches. It's like forcing two different languages to sing the same song." Dr. Rodriguez stared at him for a long time, the kind of stare that stripped away uniforms and titles. "You studied engineering." "Community college," he said, "didn't get to finish, life got in the way." For a moment she didn't speak, then she nodded slowly. "You have a good ear," she said. "Engines that can think are still machines, people forget that." He smiled faintly, unsure if she was serious. But before she left, she added, "Don't stop listening, Mr. Washington. Sometimes the people upstairs forget too." From that night on, Jamal's confidence grew in silence. Every time he cleaned the lab, he'd steal a few minutes to study the schematics, memorizing details, running mental diagnostics he'd never get credit for. He began to understand the engine's failure more intimately than the men paid to fix it. It wasn't broken, it was misunderstood. The AI wasn't failing, it was overcompensating for flaws it didn't have. He started to dream about fixing it, about proving that skill mattered more than status. But dreams were dangerous in places built on hierarchy, so he kept them quiet, tucked between mop strokes and late-night study sessions. What he didn't know was that his silence was building pressure, the same way that engine built heat before every shutdown. And just like that engine, one spark would change everything. The spark came the morning Victoria Sterling made her bet. When she pointed at him with mockery in her eyes and told him to fix it and I'll marry you, she didn't realize she had already lit the fuse. Jamal didn't see it as humiliation. He saw it as permission. The moment he touched that machine, everything that had been buried, the lessons from Detroit, the voice of his grandfather, the years of being unseen, all of it came alive. That was the day the engine stopped being their problem and became his calling. And the day the woman who laughed at him unknowingly wrote her own downfall. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now and tell me, have you ever had someone cross a line so far you stopped recognizing the person they pretended to be? Because in this story, that line had already been crossed. And soon, everyone in that building was going to learn what happens when you underestimate a man who listens harder than you ever look. Victoria Sterling sat in her office, framed by walls of glass that overlooked Silicon Valley like a queen surveying her kingdom. To outsiders, she was brilliance in heels, the youngest female CEO in her industry, the one who'd turned her father's crumbling legacy into a billion-dollar empire. But inside that pristine shell of success, there was something hollow. Power had become her oxygen, control her addiction. Every meeting, every deal, every employee interaction existed to feed one truth: she was untouchable. Her empire, Tech Vanguard, didn't just build technology, it built myth. A tower of steel and mirrors that reflected arrogance from every floor. Employees moved through it like pieces on a chessboard, and she was the hand that made every move. She built a company culture that rewarded silence and punished doubt. Meetings weren't discussions, they were performances, where fear wore suits and failure was a death sentence. Jamal was the easiest target in the building. The perfect symbol of everything she thought she'd risen above: sweat, humility, and the working class she had long disowned. To her, he wasn't a man, he was background noise, a cautionary tale of what happens to people without pedigree, yet deep down she knew why his presence unsettled her. He reminded her of who she used to be before she learned to weaponize charm and turn cruelty into strategy. The board worshipped her, investors adored her, headlines called her the Iron Innovator. But her success was built on fear, not respect. Her father had left her more than a company, he'd left her his debts, his enemies, and his ruthless survival instinct. Every deal she closed was a bandage over his failures. Every insult she delivered was armor against the doubt she refused to feel. In private, though, the cracks were widening. Emails leaked among senior staff told quiet stories of paranoia and micromanagement. Executives traded jokes about how Victoria's anger had its own schedule 9 a.m. sharp every Monday. Interns whispered about her walking the halls at night, muttering about deadlines that didn't exist. Her assistants cycled through faster than her cars. But no one dared confront her. The fear she cultivated was more effective than any management system. The walls of Tech Vanguard might have been glass, but everyone inside had learned how to be invisible. Jamal, however, wasn't part of her system. He didn't owe her obedience. He wasn't competing for bonuses or recognition. That made him unpredictable, and in Victoria's world, unpredictability was a threat. The day after her public bet, she replayed the scene in her mind while sitting in her office. The sound of the room's laughter had been satisfying, almost intoxicating, but the memory of Jamal's eyes, steady, unbroken, gnawed at her. It wasn't defiance, it was certainty, and that was more dangerous than rebellion. She opened her laptop, scrolling through the company's internal chat logs. A thread caught her attention, a string of messages between department heads mocking Jamal. The mop prophet, one engineer had typed. "I bet he's polishing his resume." Another replied, "Can't polish what doesn't exist." The comments made her smirk, but it wasn't real satisfaction, it was a mask. Deep down, she wanted him to fail publicly, not quietly. Private failure didn't feed power, spectacle did. So she planned one. By Thursday, the company was in chaos. The German investors had flown in to inspect the prototype that still refused to cooperate. They represented over €100 million in potential funding. Losing them meant collapse. The boardroom had become a war zone of exhaustion and blame. Engineers whispered theories. Executives snapped at each other. Victoria's patience dissolved like smoke. When she spotted Jamal walking past the boardroom carrying his mop bucket, she felt a spark of inspiration, cruel, theatrical, and perfect. "Stop," she said, her voice slicing through the noise. Every head turned. Jamal froze in the doorway. Victoria smiled, that same diamond-sharp smirk that hid the storm beneath. "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps we've been going about this all wrong. We've tried the world's best engineers, the latest technology, millions in research, and yet we fail. Maybe what we really need is housekeeping." Laughter, nervous, uneasy laughter. She walked toward Jamal, her heels echoing against the marble. "Mr. Washington," she said smoothly, "I believe you claimed yesterday that this machine wasn't broken, only confused. Would you care to enlighten our guests from Munich? They seem terribly interested in your perspective." Jamal's instinct told him to leave. Every eye in that room was waiting for him to make a fool of himself. But something stopped him, the memory of his grandfather's voice, firm and grounded. "Respect the machine. Don't fear people who can't hear what you do." He looked at Victoria calmly. "Yes, ma'am, I can show them." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Victoria's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flashed with something like disbelief. "Perfect," she said. "You have 2 hours. Fix what our engineers couldn't and I'll make you head of diagnostics. Fail and I'll have security escort you out permanently." It was a trap, a public humiliation disguised as opportunity. Cameras began to roll, Tech Vanguard's marketing team already framing it as a motivational livestream, innovation in real time. As technicians prepped the engine, Victoria leaned in close enough for Jamal to smell her perfume. "I do hope your mop's calibrated for German engineering," she whispered. He didn't flinch. "I don't need a mop for this," he said softly, "just time." Dr. Alina Rodriguez, standing near the investors, watched the exchange with quiet intensity. She'd seen this story before, not the exact details, but the pattern: arrogance inviting its own downfall. The livestream countdown began. 2 hours, 200 spectators, one man and a machine that had broken everyone else who touched it. Victoria turned to her audience, arms crossed, voice ringing with confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Innovation Under Pressure. Let's see if humility can outperform higher education." The crowd chuckled, cameras flashed. Jamal rolled up his sleeves and stepped toward the machine. The sound of laughter faded behind him, replaced by the low hum of circuitry warming to life. The engine trembled beneath his hands, its rhythm uneven, desperate, like a voice begging to be heard. He closed his eyes, steadying his breath. The sound changed. The vibration softened, and somewhere between arrogance and silence, a story began to unfold, one that would destroy the queen of this empire piece by piece. And for the first time since the bet, Victoria Sterling felt something she hadn't in years: Not power, not control, but fear, faint, unfamiliar, and rising fast. The silence after the applause was heavier than the roar that came before it. Cameras still rolled, capturing the moment the world shifted, yet no one knew quite what to say. The hum of the engine filled the boardroom like a living thing, smooth and steady, the sound of truth reclaiming its space. Victoria Sterling stood frozen, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the conference table. She tried to smile, but the corners of her lips betrayed her. It wasn't triumph. It was panic. She looked at Jamal, and for the first time since she'd taken over her father's empire, she saw someone she couldn't control. Jamal didn't look at her, he didn't need to. His work spoke louder than any words he could say. Dr. Alina Rodriguez handed him the printed diagnostics, flawless readings, every number perfect. Jamal took them, his face unreadable but his eyes burned with quiet pride. He handed the report to Klaus Mueller, who smiled, the kind of smile that signaled a power shift no one could reverse. "This man," Klaus said to the cameras, his accent crisp and deliberate, "has just saved Tech Vanguard from disaster. You would be wise to listen to him from now on." The words hit like a verdict. Around the room, executives exchanged nervous glances. Investors typed frantically into their phones. Somewhere in Germany, the markets began to move, and Victoria, standing in the very room she built to showcase her authority, was now the only one who looked small. The live stream ended, the applause faded, the audience dispersed, leaving behind the faint scent of ozone and humiliation. Victoria turned sharply to her team, voice trembling but sharp. "I want that recording taken down, immediately." Dr. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "It's already gone viral," she said. "You can't delete what the world's already seen." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Then I'll have legal handle it." "Legal?" Dr. Rodriguez replied coolly. "You mean the same legal department now facing HR investigations for workplace bias? Because if I were you, I'd worry less about PR and more about compliance. The board's already requesting an ethics review." For a moment the CEO's mask slipped entirely. Fear cracked through the facade. "You think you can talk to me like that?" she hissed. "I don't have to," Dr. Rodriguez said, gathering her files. "The data already did." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking a steady rhythm that echoed like a countdown. Victoria stood alone, staring at the empty boardroom. The same glass walls that once reflected her dominance now mirrored her downfall. Every reflection showed her face, but each one looked smaller than the last. Jamal stepped back into the room, holding the same wrench he'd used during the repair. He paused near the engine, checking one last calibration before shutting it down. He turned, meeting her eyes for the first time since the bet. "You wanted a show," he said quietly. "You got one." She scoffed. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Mr. Washington. You had a lucky moment." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but luck doesn't fix engines, listening does." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. He walked past her, calm, deliberate, carrying the same dignity he had when she first mocked him. But this time, everyone in the building watched him with a different kind of silence, not contempt but awe. By the next morning, the janitor who fixed it trended worldwide. News outlets picked it up within hours. "Maintenance worker outsmarts Silicon Valley CEO." Editorials called it a modern-day David and Goliath story. Think pieces flooded LinkedIn. Engineers across the world reposted clips of Jamal's steady hands, calling him a true innovator. Tech Vanguard's stock climbed 15% overnight, but while the company's reputation soared, Victoria's name became a lightning rod. Comments tore her apart. "Elitism at its finest. How out of touch can one CEO be?" She bet her dignity and lost. The board called an emergency session that evening. Victoria walked into the room, exhausted but defiant. She didn't see Jamal sitting at the far end next to Dr. Rodriguez and Klaus Mueller. The chair of the board cleared his throat. "Ms. Sterling," he began, "we've reviewed the footage, the reports, and the internal complaints filed over the past year. Given the circumstances, the board has voted to reassign your duties effective immediately. You'll retain your shares pending investigation, but your role as CEO is suspended." Victoria's hand trembled. "Suspended." Dr. Rodriguez spoke softly, almost kindly. "You built an empire of glass, Victoria, but you forgot what happens when you throw stones." The chair nodded toward Jamal. "Mr. Washington, your contributions to the company are exceptional. Effective immediately, you are being promoted to senior diagnostics lead." Dr. Rodriguez will serve as your direct supervisor." The room erupted in murmurs. Jamal didn't gloat, he simply nodded, respectful and composed. "Thank you, sir," he said. "I'll make sure no engine or company ever loses its rhythm again." Victoria's breath hitched. The irony was too sharp to ignore. She had mocked him for cleaning floors, and now he was cleaning the mess she'd made at the top. When she stood to leave, her reflection in the glass caught her off guard. For the first time, she saw what everyone else had seen all along: not strength, not confidence, but a woman trapped by her own pride. Outside, reporters waited like vultures. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved toward her face. "Victoria, did you really promise to marry him if he fixed it?" one shouted. Another yelled, "Do you think classism has consequences?" She didn't answer, she just kept walking, head high, but each step heavier than the last. And as Jamal watched from the window above, the same one he once used to watch her empire glitter from below, he realized something profound. Power wasn't about titles or money. It was about silence, the kind of silence you earn after proving every doubter wrong. The janitor had become the voice of truth in a world that had forgotten how to listen. And the queen who once ruled with cruelty now lived as proof that arrogance always collapses under its own weight. The story of Tech Vanguard had just been rewritten, not by a CEO, not by a board, but by a man who learned that respect once given to machines could heal broken empires too. The hum of the city faded as the camera cut to a dimly lit garage concrete floor, tools lined neatly on pegboards, a faint jazz record playing in the background. The same wrench that saved a billion-dollar company hung on the wall, polished and framed beside an old black-and-white photo. Jamal as a boy standing next to his grandfather, Samuel Washington. The old man's hands were grease-stained, his smile proud and weathered. Below the frame, etched into a small metal plaque, were 5 words that had shaped Jamal's life. "An engine never lies, son." It had been 6 months since the bet that shook Silicon Valley. Tech Vanguard's stock had doubled. Journalists still called Jamal the man who saved the machine, but he never called himself that. He wasn't interested in fame. His reward wasn't applause, it was peace. He'd been promoted twice since the livestream, but what mattered more was that the engineers who once ignored him now asked for his input, his mentorship, his way of listening. The same executives who had mocked his blue-collar roots now quoted him in meetings. He had proven something rare in the corporate world, that humility and mastery could coexist, and that real intelligence wasn't found in a title but in the patience to listen when no one else does. Every few weeks, Jamal flew back to Detroit. He'd visit his mother's old house, fix neighborhood engines for free, and talk to kids who dreamed big but felt invisible. They called him Professor Washington even though he never finished his degree. He'd laugh every time. "I'm no professor," he'd say. "I'm just a man who listened to a machine that everyone else talked over." On the other side of the country, Victoria Sterling was no longer the queen of Tech Vanguard. After a quiet settlement with the board, she disappeared from the headlines. Word spread that she was taking courses in organizational ethics and rebuilding a small consulting firm focused on inclusion, poetic, maybe even redemptive, but still shadowed by the stain of arrogance. Once in a while, her name appeared in articles discussing corporate reform, always footnoted with the same reminder: the Sterling incident. And yet, in some strange way, her downfall had become part of Jamal's legacy too, proof that one man's humility could outlast another's empire. Inside his garage, Jamal leaned over a half-built prototype engine, smaller and quieter than the one at Tech Vanguard. This one wasn't for profit or prestige, it was for teaching, designed to help kids understand the heartbeat of mechanics. He flipped a switch and the motor began to spin with a clean, even rhythm. The sound was warm, human, alive. He smiled to himself and said quietly, "Engines don't care where you come from. They just care that you understand their rhythm." As the hum deepened, his voice faded into narration, calm but powerful, the same tone that once silenced a room full of executives. "People spend their whole lives trying to be heard, but sometimes the world doesn't need your noise, it needs your patience. My grandfather used to say machines speak the truth if you know how to listen. I guess the same goes for people. Respect the heartbeat and it'll tell you everything you need to know." The camera slowly panned upward from his hands to the humming motor to the framed wrench glinting in the soft light. Outside, dawn began to break, spilling gold across the garage floor. Somewhere, a phone buzzed with a new notification. Tech Vanguard announces Detroit Innovation Scholarship founded by Jamal Washington. And as the screen faded to black, the rhythmic thrum of the engine continued, a heartbeat of justice, persistence, and quiet redemption echoing through steel and time. Fade out.